evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. The U.S. continues its evacuation efforts from Afghanistan. The Pentagon says on average 20 flights are leaving from the airport in Kabul every 24 hours. Thousands of Americans are still waiting to get out of Afghanistan, and the U.S. military is working with the Taliban to get them out safely. But is there a better way? Some experts say working with the Taliban may be the only way forward. Americans may have the choice to roll up their sleeves a third time next month. But not everyone's happy about that, and NTD got an analysis on the first anti-vaccine mandate court case that the Supreme Court rejected. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo is filing for retirement benefits that would allow him $50,000 every year for the rest of his life. He also pardoned a number of convicted felons. And we take a look at an art form with thousands of years of history, classical Chinese dance, and how it's able to embody ancient virtues. About 5,000 people have been evacuated from Afghanistan. That's according to the Pentagon. The U.S. mission is to secure and defend the airfield in the nation's capital. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on the military's actions and the status of the airfield.
The Pentagon says it intends to evacuate all American citizens who want to flee Afghanistan. The nation's highest-ranking military officer, General Mark Milley, says both the military and civilian sides of the Kabul airport are open. And on average, about 20 C-17s leave the Hamid Karzai International Airport every day.
Currently, the security situation at the airport is stable. However, there are threats, and we're closely monitoring those. At any moment, they could happen. We can identify them. If we identify them, we will take immediate military action without hesitation in accordance with our rules of engagement. And the Taliban and every other organization in that country knows it.
The U.S. has already evacuated 5,000 people from Afghanistan, and General Milley says it's only increasing. He expects this to be the second largest non-combatant evacuation operation in U.S. history. The largest was the evacuation of about 20,000 U.S. service members and their families during a volcanic eruption in the Philippines in 1991. What's more, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says there have been no hostile interactions with the Taliban yet, and he says the U.S. has open lines of communication with Taliban commanders.
We will continue to coordinate and deconflict with the Taliban and make sure that those people that need to get to the airfield have the right credentials to ensure passage, and the Taliban has been checking those credentials, and if they have them, they have allowed them to pass. So.
Austin says about 4,500 U.S. troops are stationed in Kabul and have set up defensive positions around the airport. They are working with the State Department to notify and process Americans and Afghans who want to leave the country. The Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, says the department is in contact with embassy staff who can evacuate with their families if they choose. And the U.S. is continuing to help Afghans get special immigrant visas and hurrying to help eligible Afghans get refugee status. Sherman says they are in discussions with the Taliban to ensure safe passage of Americans and that the militant group has said it will keep the roads open.
We have heard all of the stories that many journalists in Afghanistan are reporting about checkpoints, about harassment, about difficulties, about jammed traffic. And so we are trying to work through those issues as best we can. I will tell you this, in spite of the obstacles.
Sherman says the Taliban wants to be regarded as a legitimate government in Afghanistan, but their actions will show whether or not they will protect basic human rights. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Taliban are consolidating their control in Afghanistan. At least 3 people were killed after Taliban militants fired shots to disperse a group of protesters.
In the city of Jalalabad, 90 miles east of Kabul, a protest on Wednesday turned deadly. Local residents were attempting to raise the Afghan national flag and lower the Taliban flag. Taliban militants fired into the air and used batons to disperse the crowd. Witnesses said 3 were killed and more than a dozen were injured.
So right now the whole world is watching as you are broadcasting this from another corner of the world. you are seeing the situation in Afghanistan, and so does Taliban know that the whole world is watching, so they have to do something about it. They cannot mislead or lie on national television to the people.
And at least 17 people were injured in a stampede at the Kabul airport as Afghans tried to flee. Taliban fighters fired shots into the air to disperse the crowd. The U.S. Air Force confirmed that they found human remains inside the wheel well of a military cargo plane that had left Kabul. The Air Force is currently investigating. They released a statement saying, "Our hearts go out to the families of the deceased." Videos from earlier this week show people clinging onto U.S. aircrafts as they take off, and some falling to their deaths. Meanwhile, the Taliban leadership is making clear on how they plan to govern.
The system of the government is clear. That is an Islamic government. Sharia law would be, of course, there would be no democratic system at all because it doesn't have any base in our country. That is we are working on. In Afghanistan, our leadership in Qatar, they all are working on it.
And there are more updates on the whereabouts of the Afghan president. The United Arab Emirates confirmed that he arrived in the UAE. In a Facebook video, the exiled president made his first public comment since leaving Afghanistan, denying reports he took large sums of money with him. And Mullah Baradar, the co-founder of the Taliban, returned to Afghanistan on Tuesday for the first time in 20 years.
Now that the Taliban has taken over almost all of Afghanistan, the U.S. military appears to have no choice but to work with the group. Some experts say that the best way to support the Afghan people is to begin working with the Taliban. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Mark Ward is the former country director of the International Medical Corps in Afghanistan. He explains that the Taliban is interviewing everyone trying to access the airport. And he's worried about the Afghans who have been working with Americans but haven't gotten their visas yet.
They are scared to death right now because, and I know many, and they have received threats from the Taliban and their families have for years. So clearly the Taliban knows who they are. They are on lists, and they could be on lists that these guys at the airport have. So they're scared to death to go to the airport right now, should they get that email from the embassy saying, go to the airport.
He doesn't think there are any other options but to talk to the Taliban.
We just have to be upfront about it with the Taliban, say this is very important to us for all the reasons that the panel has articulated. And this, should be an easy win for the Taliban. They don't need to send a message anymore to the other side by killing people that used to work for us. They won.
Ward says working with the Taliban in the future is inevitable. It will also allow others to see if the Taliban will respect humanitarian principles and try not to control everything. He says the international community should continue supporting the various humanitarian projects that are currently in place, such as education and medical care. But Ward prefers the project work to be done by non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, instead of the United Nations.
I would not work too much with the UN agencies right now. I would go directly to the big international NGOs, particularly those based in the US. Sadly, the UN has a bad track record at times like this for not standing up for humanitarian principles. Look at what happened in Syria and Yemen. We have to challenge the Taliban to play by the rules, and I'm just not sure the UN will enforce them. They're just going to be interested in calling meetings after meetings.
Ward and other experts on Afghanistan on Wednesday spoke at an event hosted by the D.C.-based think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies. They agree that keeping a close eye on how the Taliban will govern the country is key to moving forward. Another way to ensure the Taliban does not create another terrorist training ground is the local media.
For my way of thinking, if they were serious, there would be an absolute protection of the media. We don't need an international body to tell us how things are. What we need is Afghanistan's free media to be able to operate. And we also need Afghanistan's Independent Human Rights Commission to be able to operate. And with those two bodies in place, doesn't matter what the Taliban says, we will know.
General Mark Milley says there are still many risks at hand, and the troops are dealing with those every single day. He says the situation there is volatile, which can and likely will change rapidly. Jason Perry, NTD News.
A Space Force officer is leaving the military in September. He was relieved of his command 3 months ago for denouncing Marxism and critical race theory. Now he recounts the experience in an interview on the Epoch Times American Thought Leaders program. Here's more.
Talking with the Epoch Times American Thought Leaders program, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer spoke about his upcoming departure from the military on September 1st. The Space Force officer was removed from his commanding post in May. That's after speaking out against critical race theory and Marxism in the military.
I wrote a letter to then acting Secretary of the Air Force explaining certain circumstances which I don't plan to make public, but also requesting an early retirement and a separation honorably from the service. And they've denied me an early retirement, but agreed that they would separate me.
During the interview, Lohmeyer described what he called the politicization of the military and the double standards at play.
Service members are allowed to advocate for the revolutionary agenda, narrative, and cause, but to either disagree with talking points or ideas or to point out the partisanship is to have a finger wagged back at you and to be accused of being politically partisan. Our service members are trained that they're supposed to be apolitical, and for good reason. And yet every aspect of their lives at the moment is becoming politicized.
3 months ago, Lohmeyer published a book titled Irresistible Revolution and promoted it on a podcast. The book cautions against allowing the spread of Marxist ideology. He also criticized the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda that is now widely talked about in the military.
The diversity, equity, and inclusion industry is steeped in critical race theory, which is rooted in Marxist ideology, and that's 100% correct.
After his appearance on the podcast, Lieutenant General Stephen Whiting relieved Lohmeyer of his command. Multiple members of Congress criticized the move. Top Republican Jim Inhofe on the Senate Armed Services Committee stated that members of our military should not only be able to speak out against Marxism, but they should be encouraged to do so, as long as they follow the rules and laws already in place. Marxism is an ideology that goes against everything this country stands for. Lohmeyer plans to accept public speaking engagements. In recent months, he's also received invitations to various events.
The CDC's made their decision, saying they'll recommend booster shots for adults. They say this is because people's antibodies are declining over time. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
The COVID booster shot won't be for everyone, and President Biden's team hasn't recommended it yet.
What we have said before, which is still true today, is we do not believe that the general population needs booster shots today.
But they're planning to roll them out by September 20th. That's if the FDA approves it by that time. Going over their booster plan, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky says 3 points were made clear to them.
First, vaccine-induced protection against SARS-CoV-2 infection begins to decrease over time. Second, vaccine effectiveness against severe disease, hospitalization, and death remains relatively high. And third, vaccine effectiveness is generally decreased against the Delta variant.
The federal government will only recommend booster shots to adults. Plus, people have to wait 8 months after they've been fully vaccinated to get one. Johnson & Johnson will have to sit this one out for now because only Pfizer and Moderna boosters will be recommended. But the WHO isn't supportive of booster shots, saying they can be put to better use in countries that need them.
Regardless of what ultimately the science comes to an agreement regarding the length of protection or the increased benefit from marginal increase in benefits from having booster doses. The reality is right now today, if we think about this in terms of an analogy, we're planning to hand out extra life jackets to people who already have life jackets while we're leaving other people to drown without a single life jacket.
Now, there's a sizable group of people who've only gotten one dose. According to the CDC, nearly 155 million Americans are fully vaccinated with mRNA shots, that is, either Pfizer or Moderna. And about 30 million people have gotten only one dose. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
President Biden says he'll issue a new vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. The president also says he's working to take action against governors fighting against mask mandates.
Today, I'm directing the Secretary of Education, an educator himself, to take additional steps to protect our children. This includes using all of his oversight authorities and legal action, if appropriate, against governors who are trying to block and intimidate local school officials and educators. And as I said before, if you aren't going to fight COVID-19, at least get out of the way.
He accused politicians fighting against mask mandates of setting a dangerous tone. The Texas and Florida governors have taken hard stances against mask mandates. Another step Biden's taking is mandating the vaccine for nursing home staff. He says if you work in a nursing home and serve people on Medicare or Medicaid, you'll need to get vaccinated. According to AARP, there are over 186,000 nursing home residents and staff in long-term care facilities. And a college in Connecticut is using some extreme measures to ramp up vaccination rates. They're going as far as fining unvaccinated students and denying them internet access. Students at Quinnipiac University could be fined more than $2,200 in total for the fall term if they don't comply with the vaccination requirements. They will also not be able to use the internet at the private liberal arts college. Students were required to submit their vaccination records by August 1st. Those not complying by September 14th will begin to face $100 weekly fines with increases of $25 after every 2 weeks, up to a maximum of $200 per week. Unvaccinated students will also face $100 fines for each virus test that they missed. And as more schools, businesses, and entertainment venues are requiring COVID-19 vaccinations, the courts now have to rule on lawsuits challenging these mandates. How are courts handling these cases so far? NTD's Melina Weiskup brings us more.
The Supreme Court has declined to rule on the very first case regarding vaccine mandates. The first of its kind lawsuit was introduced by a group of Indiana University students who say that these mandates violate their right to bodily integrity. The students first lost their case in a circuit court because the judge said that in order for him to rule differently, the Supreme Court would ultimately have to reconsider their own ruling from 1905 on vaccine mandates.
Jacobson versus Massachusetts from 1905, where Massachusetts had a requirement of people to get vaccinated for smallpox or pay a fine. There's going to be some debate that's already erupted on the Supreme Court. How far can that go, and how far can it go without any exemptions?
Justice Amy Coney Barrett declined to take up the Indiana University case because the school does allow for religious and medical exemptions to the vaccine mandate. But Carrington says should the court be faced with the case where no exemptions were allowed, it's likely the court would dive into arguments.
Given the court so far being pretty open to religious liberty claims, I think that there's a pretty good chance that a lawsuit like that would at least get a good number of votes if it got to the Supreme Court. We're going to see how they want to balance religious liberty objections versus public claims about health. But given that, I think that a lawsuit would at least get a pretty serious hearing before the Supreme Court.
And he says vaccine restrictions could open the door for discrimination cases, depending on how far the courts go. The circuit court judge who ruled on the Indiana University case said that students who do not want to be vaccinated may go elsewhere. And places that do allow for religious exemptions are still forcing unvaccinated people to wear masks and socially distance. This is one reason George Mason University professor Todd Zawinski is suing his university. His only options are get vaccinated, wear a mask, or get fired. His suit claims this kind of requirement forces him to publicly disclose his unvaccinated status, which infringes upon his liberty interests. In addition, he says it ignores the existence of natural immunity.
And the idea that they would compel me to do this when I have natural immunity, when I have a demonstrated antibodies test that shows I have very robust natural immunity, while at the same time allowing these other vaccines to qualify just doesn't satisfy the constitutional requirements.
His case is awaiting trial, and just this week, a nonprofit group called Children's Health Defense filed a lawsuit against Rutgers University in New Jersey over their vaccine mandates. So we'll have to see how the courts continue to handle these variety of cases moving forward, and if the Supreme Court will revisit or perhaps even change their ruling from 1905 on vaccine mandates. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
T-Mobile US today confirming hackers stole personal data from more than 40 million people. The stolen data includes social security numbers, birth dates, names, and driver's license information. But it said no financial details were compromised. The victims include nearly 8 million existing T-Mobile wireless customers, as well as former and even prospective customers. On Sunday, the company said it had started investigating the hack after media outlet Vice reported it. It says the entry point of the hack has now been closed, and it says it will offer affected individuals 2 years of free identity protection services from security firm McAfee. And coming up, a conversation with a professional dancer about an art form with thousands of years of history. Classical Chinese dance. She says its very essence embodies ancient morals. More soon here on NTD News. NTD's Classical Chinese Dance competition approaches, and we sat down with one candidate, Marilyn Young, to understand more of her artistic journey and what she has in store for us this year.
A lot of times people ask us, oh, what do you do? And we're like, oh, we're dancers. And they're like, oh, what do you do, ballet or like modern dance? And we're like, oh no, we do classical Chinese dance. And then they're like, oh, what is that?
Marilyn Young is from classical Chinese dance company Shen Yun. A former gold medal holder, this is her third time joining the competition.
I've been very familiar with classical Chinese culture because my mom was a singer in Shen Yun, and both my brothers are dancers in Shen Yun Performing Arts. So it was kind of like a natural thing for me to follow in their footsteps, literally. When I was very small, I would look up to the dancers and be like, I want to be up there one day. As a kid, what really enchants you about Shen Yun was the colors, the costumes, and it was always about kind of the excitement of dancing on stage in front of an audience. But then once you actually start professionally, there are a lot of insights that you see afterwards, which is one thing, dance is not easy.
She is particularly impressed with one dance training she received at Shen Yun, Shen Dai Shou, or the body leads the hands, and Kwa Dai Tui, or the hips lead the legs.
It really makes your moves very clean and big, and the way you can express yourself through your dance is a lot more powerful.
In this technique, the core of the body, the source of all emotions, powers all of the movements.
For example, if someone were to express like shyness, instead of just using your arms, for example, to pose like a pose that's like shy, or like you're blocking your face, or that it's like your body is moving first, like happy, like you might move here first, like excitement, it always comes from this one point. Also, Shen Dai Shou Kwa Dai Tui makes our techniques better too. Your spins will be a lot faster, you'll spin a lot more. And then when you use Shen Dai Shou Kwa Dai Tui for jumping and like tumbling, it's very different for a dancer. They will immediately jump higher and feel like more lofty when they do it.
The dance Young choreographed for this year's competition shows the story of Wang Zhaojun, one of the 4 most beautiful women in ancient China. Wang prevented bloodshed in her country by being a peace bride, married off to a remote and barren land that's close to today's Mongolia. But instead of focusing on the teary departure scene, Yang turned to the beauty's life on the barren land.
For me, I incorporated some Mongolian dance moves. I wanted to show that her heart was open. She accepts her fate, and she's not bitter about it, and that it's already become a part of her. like this culture, this Mongolian culture is part of who she is now. And then, but she sees a flower, and then that brings back, like, the memories come flooding back to her, and it shows that she still has that Han Dynasty maiden in her bones. I don't want people to believe that Wang Zhaojun, her whole life was sorrowful, that it was bitter. I want to show that how she was very generous. She won't drown in her own sorrows, that she will keep looking forward, and then that she'll continue her life in the best way possible.
Yang said classical Chinese dance is able to embody 5,000 years of traditional morality and virtues into its essence, and it requires certain traits from the dancers.
What really stands out is the selflessness. Like when we're dancing on stage, for example, it's not, as dancers, usually people nowadays think it's about the spotlight. They want to be in the front row, they want to be the lead dancer. But for us, it's not about that. We want to give the audience, bring them on a spiritual level. I feel like classical Chinese dance gave meaning to my life because I'm doing something that's bigger than myself.
That's to revive traditional Chinese culture.
Through classical Chinese dance, I got to understand what China's heritage really is supposed to be like. It's divine.
Now she gets to bring these traditions back to life through this expressive art form.
Dance itself is a universal language. Like, you don't have to be of the same culture to understand Chinese dance. You can't really use words to describe China's history, China's dance, Chinese art. It's something you should definitely come and experience for yourself.
The competition will be held on September 2nd through the 5th. If you enjoy dance or ancient Chinese stories or wisdom, you can get your ticket at dance.ntdtv.com. You can also watch our live stream of the competition at ntd.com. And coming up, a candidate for California's recall election is dropping out of the race after suffering a heart attack. The recall ballots have already been mailed out with his name on them. And over 100 large fires are burning in the United States. One recent fire on the West Coast multiplied in size overnight. Smoke is visible from 100 miles away. More in just a moment here on NTD News.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
candidate for California's gubernatorial recall election has dropped out of the race after suffering a heart attack. The recall ballots have already been mailed out with his name on them. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
Former Congressman Doug Ossie announced on Tuesday his campaign for California governor is over. In a statement, the 66-year-old said he experienced a medical event on Sunday and was rushed to Mercy General Hospital where he was treated for a heart attack. Ossie was among the top 5 Republicans in the race, according to recent polls. He could still receive some votes, as California officials have already sent absentee ballots to many registered voters on Monday. Voters have until September 14th to decide whether or not they want to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. If they choose yes, they will pick from a list of 46 candidates, which includes the now withdrawn Doug Ossie. If Governor Gavin Newsom is recalled, the person with the top vote would replace him as a simple majority decides to recall him. No major Democrats are on the list. The California Republican Party voted against making an endorsement in the race. There will be a recall debate in San Francisco on Thursday. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, businessman John Cox, and Assemblyman Kevin Kiley have confirmed their participation. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
There are currently 104 large fires burning across 12 states from Minnesota to California. One fire grew 8 times in size overnight. NTD's David Lamb brings us more.
The Caldor fire broke out on August 14th. Since last night, it jumped from 6,500 acres to over 50,000 acres. Mandatory evacuations were ordered for thousands of residents in California's El Dorado County. Smoke can be seen throughout Northern California. According to CAL FIRE, the fire grew due to extremely dry timber pushed by the southwestern winds and the steep terrain. A tree service owner says clearing the trees is big work.
It's all chainsaw work. We use big chainsaws, and we put big timber on the ground, and it's quite exciting.
Higgins has been an arborist for over 16 years. He's helped CAL FIRE with wildfires for about 6 years.
So they hire us timber fallers to come in there and put these dangerous trees on the ground. And we do this pretty much every fire that I've seen or I've been to myself. Our job as a falling module is that we go in there and put them on the ground, and we do it safely so people can repopulate and not be in danger when they get back to their devastated properties.
Now, smoky skies are common in the California mountains where the fires burn. But even over 100 miles away, the Bay Area skies are hazy with smoke. As of Wednesday, the Caldor fire is 0% contained, but is expected to be fully contained by the end of the month. Hopefully, we'll have clearer skies by then. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is scheduled to leave office next week, but during his last week, he's still making use of his power as governor. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
2 things that Governor Cuomo did this week raised some eyebrows. First, he's pardoned a number of convicted felons, some of which were tied to killings. Second, he's filed for a pension that would guarantee him $50,000 every year for the rest of his life. Under state law, neither resignation nor impeachment would hinder an official from getting his or her pension. But because Cuomo resigned after a number of scandals, some are saying he shouldn't get any pension. We asked people in New York City whether he should get the money. Most of them said yes and went even a step further.
I don't even think he should have resigned.
I don't think he should be impeached. I don't think he should be blamed for anything.
Somebody got proof of the things? Anything has a proof?
Despite the rumors and everything, he's still a good governor. I believe he still should get his pension.
But people were not as supportive when it comes to pardoning convicted felons.
I don't think it's appropriate to put violent people back on the streets. I think if you are involved in killing somebody, you should not be back on the streets.
Cuomo has a terrible track record of releasing violent criminals on parole. So he certainly shouldn't be allowed to do it.
Makes no sense. And I don't think we should be allowing people to do that anymore either.
The felons all served at least 15 years in prison already and have used that time for graduating college or doing other meaningful community activities. Some of them have been out of prison for years, but are now allowed to stay in the US instead of being deported back to their countries. Cuomo is scheduled to leave office next week. After that, Lieutenant Kathy Hochul will take over the job. One thing she's already advocating for is a mask mandate for school children, something she calls a necessary step. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
A group of restaurants is suing the New York City mayor over vaccination requirements. A restaurant advocacy group, along with 2 Italian restaurants and an Italian bakery, have filed the lawsuit. They want the court to halt Mayor Bill de Blasio's order for the mandate. The order requires vaccine proof to enter a restaurant, a gym, or performance venue. Customers would need at least 1 dose. Workers would also need to be vaccinated. New York is the first city to make such a requirement. Some restaurant workers have already threatened to quit. Restaurant owners are worried that in the current job market, they would be hard to replace. And New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is making some exemptions to the vaccine mandate. They apply to certain professional performers and athletes who don't live in New York City. The mayor signed an executive order Monday clarifying the exemptions. The following people don't have to show proof of vaccination to enter indoor entertainment venues, but they have to wear masks. Performing artists coming to New York City to perform, professional athletes coming to New York City to compete, and anyone that accompanies them. They cannot be New York City residents and cannot be employed by New York City venues. As for restaurants, customers who only enter to place an order, pick up an order, or use the restroom don't have to show proof of vaccination. There are no other exemptions. And R. Kelly's sex abuse trial began Wednesday with a federal prosecutor calling the R&B superstar a predator who demanded absolute loyalty from many women and underage girls he recruited for sex in a 2-decade racketeering scheme.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Melendez told a jury of 7 men and 5 women in a Brooklyn federal court that Kelly used, quote, lies, manipulation, threats, and physical abuse to dominate his victims and often filmed their sexual encounters. Melendez said Kelly would require his victims to get permission before doing virtually anything, including going to the bathroom, and blackmail them by threatening to release self-incriminating letters he forced them to write if they fled. Kelly, a 3-time Grammy winner whose songs include I Believe I Can Fly and Bump and Grind, has pleaded not guilty to a 9-count indictment that also includes accusations of bribery and extortion. He has strongly denied wrongdoing. Attorney Gloria Allred at the courthouse told reporters she represents 3 of the alleged victims.
All I can say is that I'm very confident that the court will afford a fair trial, both to Mr. Kelly and also to the persons who allegedly are victims.
Excited to have this for Mr. Kelly to have his day in court.
Kelly's legal team has characterized the accusers as disgruntled groupies who had pined to be with him, only to change their stories later. The case is the culmination of years of suspicions and accusations against Kelly, many discussed in the 2019 Lifetime documentary Surviving R. Kelly. Kelly has been jailed for more than 2 years and could face decades in prison if convicted. Even if acquitted, he still faces sex-related charges in Illinois and Minnesota, where he has also pleaded not guilty.
It's getting a little medieval in Central Park. Weapons are smashed and armor is put to test. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on these modern knights.
Probably not what you'd expect to see in Central Park. Knights in armor weighing up to 100 pounds. One Saturday a month, members of Santa's Knights and Gladiators NYC meet here for battle matches. This is the nonprofit's flagship program, offering free martial arts. 40-year-old Damian DeGrazia founded Gladiators NYC 8 years ago.
There's nothing more important than martial arts and fitness for people today, because besides the danger involved, it's the fitness you get out of it, the health that you get out of it that's important, because the thing that's killing Americans the most right now, besides COVID, right, which is health-oriented, kind of fitness-oriented type of challenges as well, is healthy lifestyles and all that kind of stuff. And the more that we can bring that out there, the less we're going to need doctors and medicines and interventional medicine and all that kind of stuff. We just hit the core of it, which is be healthy, do fitness. And when you start to do more fitness, you eat more healthy, you change your lifestyle, and now we're saving lives.
Something the former Air Force member says is his only real motivation in life.
I remember I was asked by a supervisor at Morgan State, like, what motivates you? Does money motivate you? And I was like, No. And I was like, well, what motivates you? I was like, helping people. I like to help people.
The life of a knight doesn't come with a six-figure salary, but he says it's fulfilling, and people love to see him in armor. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, counterfeit FBI badges intercepted in Chicago, all arriving from China. Border officials say it's not the first time. And a retired Chinese official and his wife reportedly drowned in floodwaters. They were trying to drive under a railroad bridge after heavy rainfall in Beijing. Find out more here on NTD News. Customs and Border Protection in Chicago found several packages from China containing counterfeit law enforcement badges. NTD's Evelyn Lee brings us more.
U.S. border officers in Chicago seized a number of counterfeit law enforcement badges over the past week, all arriving from China. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, announced the news in a Tuesday press release. The agency seized a total of 9 fake badges, including 1 FBI badge and 8 DEA or Drug Enforcement Administration badges. The parcels they were found in were destined for locations across the U.S. CBP officers say the badges could have led to disastrous consequences harmful to the public. But it's not the first time counterfeits from China have entered the country. Other fake items range from fake currency to COVID-19 related products, including N95 masks. Just last Friday, CBP revealed it had seized thousands of fake vaccination cards this year. The falsified cards come fitted with a CDC logo, and they too are all from China. CBP says China remains the main source for counterfeit goods the agency seizes by far. Indiana's Attorney General is launching an investigation into the state's education system. He's seeking to protect it against nefarious influences from the Chinese Communist Party. Republican Todd Rokita tells talk show host Lars Larson the state's college campuses and its students are at risk. He says he sent a civil investigative demand to Valparaiso University to probe whether the school had violated the Higher Education Act of 1965 or Indiana's Deceptive Consumer Sales Act.
According to filings made by the university at the Federal Department of Education, where the Chinese Communist Party has given over $1 million to Valparaiso for the privilege of operating what we call a Confucius Institute on the campus, that then also goes and sends its hand-picked lecturers and teachers, handpicked by the Communist Party, into K-12 schools around the area.
Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill are also sounding the alarm over the CCP's influence on U.S. education. An elderly couple reportedly drowned in floodwaters following heavy rainfall in Beijing on Monday. Chinese media says the husband was a retired senior official. The couple were driving along a concave road under a bridge built for railways, but the floodwaters ran too high and they couldn't pass through. The outlet said many vehicles were flooded and one was completely submerged. The water level indicator shows that when the incident occurred, the water was about 6 feet high. According to Beijing Daily, the flood is partially a result of drainage system failure. The report says the area's drainage lacked the capacity to siphon off the downpour. The water rose quickly and even manhole covers were pushed open by the backflowing rainwater. A Chinese netizen said it's not the first time the road in this area was blocked by heavy rain, but nothing had been done to increase its drainage capacity. Some lamented, saying they didn't learn any lessons from the floods in Jingzhou City.
Coming up, an ancient Roman snack bar opens to the public. The food wasn't served like today's fast food, but it was fast. And a teenage pilot is aiming to become the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. We'll have her story in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow,
I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled My Pillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to mypillow.com right now to get deep discounts on all My Pillow products. For example, you can get my premium My Pillows regularly $69.98, now just $29.98, the lowest price ever.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
"19-year-old pilot Zara Rutherford took off on Wednesday at the start of a 3-month bid to become the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. Soraya Ali reports.
At just 19 years old, Zara Rutherford hopes to become the youngest woman ever to fly solo around the world. The British-Belgian pilot took off from Kortrijk-Wevelgem Airport in western Belgium on August 18th, aboard her Shark Ultralight, the world's fastest microlight aircraft. Her plan is to reach 52 countries in 3 months and snag the world record. She'll be stopping in Greenland, China and Nicaragua, to name a few, and staying with local families and in hotels.
Fatigue is definitely a factor, but I'm making sure that I'm always well rested. And then there's some more logistical complications, more weather-wise, that could delay some days, but I'm looking forward to it, and I've got a great team supporting me.
Her team includes her parents, Beatrice and Sam, who are also both pilots.
Obviously, mixed feelings. When she first told me about it, my heart skipped a beat. It took me a bit of time to digest, and now I'm so proud and fully behind her. But as I said, mixed feelings.
The current female title holder, Shasta Ways, flew solo around the world at 30 years old. The youngest male record holder, Mason Andrews, was 18 when he made the journey. For 19-year-old Zara, the world record is just one of many big dreams.
I'm hoping to go to university next year to study either computer science or electrical engineering. And then after that, a huge dream of mine is to become an astronaut. So we'll see how that goes, but that would be amazing.
Artisans in Ukraine are striving to keep an ancient profession alive. An ethnic group known as the Hutsuls started the country's axe-making tradition and passed it down for generations. Here are the details.
Long handles, colorful heads. These ornate axes are one of the most prized handcrafts of the Hutsuls. This ethnic group now inhabits the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine. In the Hutsul village of Brustery, a small number of craftsmen still possess the skills to make traditional axes.
I worked at the workshop with my grandfather. I watched how it was done, usually helping him. I'm self-taught. I've never learned to be a Mosyasnik axe maker. I didn't learn that in an institute.
Making a Hutsul axe is no easy task. The process begins with kindling a fire inside a furnace. The temperature must reach over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Metals are heated, then poured into a mold to make the axe head. In his workshop, Haporak then polishes the mold and crafts a wooden handle. His son drills holes for further embellishments.
We start to tap the colored plastic with a pattern.
Here, Haporak's wife completes the final step, decoration. The family can create 30 to 40 axes a month. Haporak is the 6th generation embracing the artistic metal craft. He's now passing on his knowledge to his 9-year-old son.
This is a tradition. That's why I will continue to keep it.
In the past, traditional axes were used for hiking in the mountains or everyday work on the farm. Now they serve as accessories for wedding or other ceremonies. Hutsuls tend to wear traditional dresses during those special occasions, and the men hold the axes.
If craftsmen refuse this profession, although it is not even a profession, it is a hobby, then it will disappear. It will only be history.
The axes sell for $10 or more, and local residents and tourists are the main customers.
Would you be surprised to learn that ancient Romans had something like fast food? Well, they didn't have a drive-through, so to speak, but this snack bar was a get-and-go establishment. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on this ancient eatery, now open to the public.
The ancient city of Pompeii in Italy is still being excavated and restored. Much of it was preserved by a layer of volcanic ash. One of the latest sites open to the public is this eatery, called a thermopolium. Here, Romans would enter to buy hot food and beverages, an establishment popular amongst the lower and middle classes. The director of Pompeii Archaeological Park says they left the thermopolium the way they found it to give tourists a perspective into the Roman daily life.
There's a story behind this, and there's so much information in these finds. And it's so complicated getting this information. And I think also the thermopolium shows this approach because we can see here the pots and amphora in their original position. So you really get an idea of how these objects, but also the paintings, were part of a daily life environment and not single objects or works of art.
Romans would come in, point to a food on the counter, and take their snack with them. The park chose to complete the excavation and restore its wooden elements as exceptional decorations and paintings emerged. Other sites in the same area as the thermopolium are also open to the public, but still under restoration. But the restoration process is also on display.
We don't want to share only the ultimate result of the excavation, the pot in the showcase or the monument that you can visit, but the process. So how does archaeology work? How does restoration work? How does it look behind the scenes?
The House of Orion is one of those additional tourist-friendly areas. In it, you can see a mosaic pavement of Orion. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
A new breed of safari vehicle is silently making its way across one of Kenya's national reserves. One company is converting the gas-guzzling vehicles to offer tourists a more eco-friendly and quiet experience. David Doyle has more.
Gliding silently through Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve is a new generation of safari vehicle. Gone is the noise and emissions of the traditional gas guzzlers. This Toyota 4x4 Land Cruiser, driven by tour guide Sylvester McKenye, is 100% solar powered.
If you drive here silently, you will of course get much closer to animals, especially the elephants that we are in now, because there's no vibrations on the ground and there's no the fume that will get a smell from like other cars. So with this, you can get all those things. They are not disturbed in any way.
Off-road vehicles are a common sight in the at times carbon-heavy wildlife industry, but McKenye is head keeper at Embu River Camp, an eco-lodge which runs entirely on solar power. It bought 3 of the vehicles, which were converted by Nairobi-based Opibus, the only company in Kenya currently changing diesel and petrol-powered off-road safari vehicles into electric ones.
What we do first is take out the engine.
Electrical engineer Wanjiru Kamau says the company has big plans to electrify Kenya's roads as well as its reserves, starting with minibus taxis.
What we envisioned by 2030 is to have all matatus on the road to be electric, as well as utility vehicles. And what we have at the moment also are motorbikes.
Kamau says the Swedish-Kenyan business has converted 10 vehicles used in Kenyan game parks. She adds that, as well as being more environmentally friendly, the electric motors cut operating costs by half.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens